All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. So today, from the outset, let's be honest. CMMC has been the elephant in the room for several years now. Many thought it would get delayed into oblivion. Others hoped it might just, frankly, disappear. And the reality is this: CMMC isn't going away. It's getting teeth. Whether you're addressing FCI at level 1 or CUI at level 2, and we will explain what those are and how it relates to what you do in your organization. The Department of Defense is making one thing really clear: no compliance, no contracts. And today we're going to cut through the noise. The goal is to help you really keep the contracts and to be able to build on your relationships with government contractors, moving up from there. CMMC, it's not a check the box type compliance game. It's a contract gate. It's really the way to look at it. And soon you're either going to have the key or you're going to get locked out. So let's dive in. Turn it over to my co-panelists and our host, Ashley.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley. I'm joined today by two fantastic speakers who have been in the trenches helping businesses navigate cybersecurity and a lot of other IT challenges in between. First up is David Morrow. He is our Vice President of Business Development at NetGain. David brings lots of experience advising leaders on security, compliance, and risk management. He's worked with everyone from manufacturers and defense contractors to financial firms and healthcare providers. He's very good at making complex issues like CMMC a whole lot more approachable. Joining David and I is Sam Durso. He is one of our top security analysts at NetGain. Sam works directly with clients to translate compliance and regulatory frameworks into real-world security strategies. He helps business leaders prepare for audits, conduct risk assessments, and close the compliance gap. So he brings both technical insight and a practical approach to our conversation today. So let's get started. What is CMMC?
I have no idea. Sam? No, I'm just kidding. So, Sam, walk us through CMMC. I mean, obviously, anybody that has agreed to join the call is involved in it. They need to meet either level 1, level 2, or beyond. But walk us through kind of like the framework in general and what it governs.
Yeah, so CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, basically is a whole regulation that follows under FCI and CUI, like you said, and just the two different data types that companies are holding and how they need to properly secure those types of data, what they need to do to make sure, the bad people can't get them, because a lot of this data is government owned, government produced, or government provided. And so the last thing we want, of course, is government secrets to get out. And so really that's the biggest thing behind it, is securing that government data.
Yeah, it's really one of the regulations that addresses very closely with national security, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
that's why it's so important. Yeah, that's good.
I feel like CMMC is influencing the way that businesses approach and think about cybersecurity overall too. It's kind of a wake-up call for those that deal with CMMC compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, and every organization will get involved in different ways, right? Depending on the type of data that they access, whether it's federal contract information, which would be a level 1, or whether it's controlled unclassified information, which would be a level 2. But when somebody's involved in all of that, and it eventually goes into a tank or goes into a rocket, right, later on, then that's where these requirements need to be met. And as we'll see coming up, they're pretty strict and they're very serious about this. So
we see a lot of hesitation from companies that feel like they're too small to be targeted. What would you say to businesses that think CMMC isn't something that they need to prioritize?
well, I would tell you that by not doing it or by doing it in a truly non-compliant way, meaning just kind of checking the box or fudging things a little. Let's say you're on the level 1 track, the basic self-assessment, because you're self-assessing, you may think that you can get away with some stuff or not have everything. It's a very high risk. I mean, there's still going to be an annual affirmation of what you submit by a senior official. That's still, it's a legal attestation. You subject yourself to federal legal action, which can be triggered under the False Claims Penalties and False Claims Act, which we have seen happen. And a lot of prime contractors are requiring verification from their subs because they themselves don't want to get in trouble or don't want to be in jeopardy of losing their major contracts. Sam, what all are you seeing in terms of risks of noncompliance?
Yeah, so kind of like you mentioned, the penalties that you could face under False Claims Act. I mean, we've seen companies, there was an article recently where a company agreed to pay $4.6 million in fines because they were falsely certifying their compliance with the government. And, it being this big, one thing that companies need to remember is if this was just a recommendation, it wouldn't be going through Congress to review and approve it. It would just simply go on the internet and say, hey, follow this if you want to, not, having a whole legal support framework behind it.
Yep. Absolutely. And in your experience, Sam, if you don't mind me asking, have you seen organizations where they've gotten audited or where they've been requested from the prime, like the subs get requested from their prime to be verified, things like that?
Yeah, I have. And unfortunately, I've even seen, companies put in all the policies and procedures they need and say, oh, that's all we need. They wipe their hands, they're good to go. And then the government comes back and says, no, we need you to actually implement these policies. If you can't,
Right.
we're going to take your contracts away.
Yep. So it's a whole level of reality check that is occurring. So let's kind of walk through and the risks are clearly high. Obviously, there are federal laws, there's legal attestations, so there's risks of jail time. Like they're serious about it. This is the federal government, but on a more day to day and a more common risk that they have, right, is you could lose their contracts, right? You can lose those relationships, and depending on your revenue, it could be financially catastrophic, which clearly nobody wants. And this isn't about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is about identifying and empowering everybody to know the difference and to know what needs done. So let's walk on through that. The different levels. There's 3 primary levels. Today's discussion is primarily on level 1 and level 2. Sam, you want to walk us through kind of level 1? That's the FCI, the financial contract information. What is FCI? Let's start there. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so FCI, federal contract information, isn't, like unclassified information. It's basically data like contracts, documents, purchase orders, stuff like that. It's basically the receipts. It's something that you don't need to be too concerned about, but the government still wants you to just protect it a little. But it's completely different than what CUI is.
And CUI is what? Control
CUI,
unclassified information. What are some examples of it?
Yeah, so stuff that's like ITAR controlled, the international arms, all that. It's basically data that's intellectual property of the government. So it's stuff that's protected. is stuff that we don't want to get out there. Like FCI, if you lose a receipt out there, yeah, you're gonna get a slap on the wrist, but it won't be as serious as, losing a piece of intellectual property of the US government.
Right. Absolutely. This isn't, and I think one thing that a lot of people thought in the beginning is that CUI and CMMC dealt with classified information, like it was all top secret information. And that's not what we're talking about here, is it?
No.
Right. So we're actually talking about unclassified information, but stuff that's not public. And the government is restricting public access. And so the security controls have to be in place so that threat actors and attackers can't go get that and then leak it to the public. Same thing with FCI, right? Federal contract information. Sam, would that include information on like bids that are going on? Like bids for Department of Defense related materials and services, things like that? Is that what's meant by federal contract information?
Yeah, basically stuff like that. Sometimes it could be, the system security plan, which is, it's just a plan, but it's not the actual blueprints of what you need to do.
Right. Makes perfect sense.
So, how do I prepare for CMMC? Let's walk through a timeline from first conversation to certification ready. Let's talk about what the average journey would look like.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So originally, right off the bat, you have to determine whether you're level 1 or level 2, right? And level 1 would mean you're not actually accessing and holding controlled unclassified information, CUI. You're more in the realm of being a sub of in having access of the FCI, the federal contract information only. Should that be the case, then there are, how many controls are there, Sam? 15, 17?
About 16, 17, yeah. I mean, they're broken into 6 families.
Right. And then each one of those you will legally attest to that you've done it. But one of the risks that we've seen is some organizations are doing that without consulting with a CMMC provider, and they're getting it wrong and they're getting in trouble sometimes, right? It's just that it's complicated. And so by even though you can self-attest, by having somebody that does and specializes in CMMC review it with you, then you can guide yourself to accurately answer those questions. And then, Sam, do you want to walk us through like a level 2? Because the difference between level 1 and level 2 is dramatic.
Oh, it really is. And yeah, so level 2, it's more than 100 controls. They're broken into 14 families. So, a huge increase from level 1. And so really what you want to start with is, of course, figuring out what is the CUI you're going to hold, where's it going to be stored, how's it going to be processed, transferred, so on. And then after that, you're going to want to figure out how do you protect it, you classify it within your organization, you go through the whole risk assessment process, where are our gaps, where are we missing the protection. From there, you're going to want to generate a SSP, system security plan, which basically is your living document telling you this is, what's met, this is what isn't met, and this is how. Sometimes you want to attach network diagrams to that too. And then from there, you build that into a plan of action and milestone document, or a POAM, which is also another living document. And it's basically like your budget sheet. This control right here, we're missing who's responsible for it, who's going to implement it, when will it be implemented by, what's the cost, what data will it protect, all of that stuff. There's a lot of categories in a POAM. And then from there, you fill out the POAM, you get your SPRS score, which is basically your compliance score. And you hand that off to the auditing party and they'll confirm it. And then that's how you get certified.
And that sounded really easy. Like, it sounds like I could get it done in like a day. Can I do that? Or
no? Absolutely
what you're telling me is this takes a little while, right?
It does.
So a couple things to highlight, right, is the 117 controls or whatever, depends on how you count the sub paragraphs, but let's just say it's 117 controls. For each one, every single one, in order to get certified, correct? You have to meet it. Like it has
Yes.
to be met, and you have to show proof that not only are you planning the control, that won't be sufficient. The control has to be in place and it's been tested for every single one. And if one, let's say, given your business, doesn't apply, you're not allowed to actually say that doesn't apply. You actually have to say it's not met. We haven't met it. And then you turn it over to the third party auditor, the C3PO, to come and say that one is okay to not meet because it doesn't apply given your business. Is that how it works? That's my
Yeah.
experience with a few
Yeah,
clients. That's why I wanted
that's
to ask.
basically how it works. And one way I look at CMMC level 2 is kind of like a relationship. You need that communication to keep it going. And that's no different from CMMC. You need that communication, that documentation trail to show everything. If you say no or yes on something and don't have that document, they're going to take it away. They're going to say, you don't have this, you didn't show proof.
Yeah. So it's kind of like taking a deduction on tax
Yeah,
return, right? Like you can do it, but you have to have that receipt in order to
yeah,
submit it. Otherwise, there's additional risk more than we're already at. Um, and level one, they don't need a third party assessment. They should definitely have third party guidance in self attesting, but they don't need a third party auditor to come in and do it, correct?
yeah,
Level
that's
two,
correct.
yeah, level two, they actually have to have the third party auditor come in and do this.
Yes, that is correct. The C3PAO or third party assessor, basically.
Okay. And the journey that is shown on the slide, that seems pretty accurate. Like initiation, you have to identify scope, determine your levels, determine each category, each control, check, do a gap analysis, right? Check the readiness, implement it, have the practices in place, have the policies in place, the controls, run a mock audit, right? Even at level two, and then engage in that third party assessment or do your self assessment.
Yeah, and let me give some quick background on this too, on how long it could take for level 2. I started my career writing policies and procedures, so that's what my security career was built off, is that compliance level work. So I know a policy and procedure front to back by memory. When I was doing freelance work for a client and started them from ground zero on CMMC level 2, it took me alone a month just to get them every policy and procedure they need, written, drafted, and approved. So
Yep.
if you put that in perspective of then you need to implement the controls outside the policies,
Right.
that's going to take quite a bit of time.
Right. And I don't know if we mentioned, but you are CMMC certified, right? Or
Yes, I'm a RP
vetted.
and RPA,
Yeah. RPA. Okay. That's great.
Remind us what RPA is, Sam.
registered practitioner advanced.
I was going to ask, like regarding this slide, if you're self-assessing or you're having a third-party assessment, shouldn't you have like somebody else look at it first? Like, I feel like if you're self-assessing, you should still at least have a third party like look at it and consult on it for like a second set of eyes. Um,
100%. And it's not, we're not saying that because we are with NetGain and we happen to be one, right? It's genuinely required or very common, right? Because you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. And having people that are engaged with the congressional reports, the machinations of the implementation, the schedule, what auditors, knowing the auditors, and actually seeing what it is that is occurring at level one. One might think, well, I don't really need that because I can just self attest, but you still do, at least in the beginning, right? Because you need to make sure you're doing it right, and then the subsequent year, if you have it down, you could probably rely on those experts less, assuming there's no more changes and things stay the way they are. But in the beginning, you want to get it right because it's not just the Department of Defense that could come in and audit you, right? It is really more so the prime contractors that are going to be requiring it. And they won't keep those contracts with you if it's not accurate and done, meaning you might think, well, this won't really apply, or we can get away with it by doing this. You don't know until you have somebody that kind of looks at it all the time and they can kind of explain it. And then you know that you're in safe waters. I think it's really prudent to do it right the first time, especially even when you're at level 1. Level 2, clearly you need the help because you will be audited before you can get certified. You will be audited by a third party.
And David, just to
Very
add to that,
well.
there's one thing that we should also think about in a way is, if I'm a chief security officer of my company or I'm the CEO, especially for small companies, they just have the CEO, they don't have a security officer. That
Right.
company's their baby. They're not going to
Yep.
want to say my company doesn't meet this. If they see it as a benefit to their company, you just check yes, then they're going to do it most of the time. And sometimes they don't even fully understand what the question is. I've worked with directors of IT before that didn't even know what an Active Directory is. And so for them to do the CMMC assessment, even a level 1, is still a concern to me without a second pair of eyes from someone who knows it.
Yeah. And I will say that the CMMC audits and the CMMC compliance, it's really much more than check the box, because when you think of various regulatory frameworks, some are, they all claim to have teeth, but the CMMC framework is one that really does have teeth, and it really is one that they are taking seriously. I know there have been changes, and I know that there have been, with the change in administration and a focus on more deregulation, people were thinking that this could go away. It is absolutely not going away. It is definitely on schedule. Those divisions are still funded. Those divisions are still being rolled out, and the timeline is still as is. It's still set. So this coming October, things are going to get real. And so if you need to be level 2, right, and you haven't started, and it's coming up, or approaching July already, that's something that needs to be addressed straight away. Wouldn't you agree, Sam, given the timeline? Meaning every client will be different. Every business will be different. Some will have certain controls already, some won't, right? But there's time to implement all of those. All of those take time, and then they have to be running with testing done on them, being able to verify that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree on all of that. And that's the hard part is a lot of people just want to get the certification. They don't even want to test it. Like they buy a SIM solution, for example, and they don't even test it, but then they check the box saying they have it. Well, then there's going to be a problem if that SIM solution results in a breach.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Plus, if you're just buying a SIM solution, you're going to wind up with a lot of noise. You're going to wind up with a lot of false positives, and it's going to be, it can cloud the achieving of the compliance. That's why it's got to be tuned and focused. Which brings up another point that we all talked about earlier, and that is their entire environment, let's say, doesn't need to be controlled here with all these controls, right?
No, actually, if that environment's going to have some kind of affiliation with CUI, it needs to be completely locked down. Because for all accounting might not have anything to do with CUI. But then you got, say, Chris over here in HR accidentally sending a CUI related email over to accounting.
Right. That's what I was going to ask. So, because there is a lot of talk on, well, if the CUI is accessed through these systems, we have to physically physically lock down access to those systems, as well as the digital access, the permissions, and etc. But if they're able to go outside that system and share it in other departments in the organization, depending on the configuration, then then the whole organization does need to be. But there are cases where it could be segmented and it could be locked down.
Yeah, there are cases. I mean, the last place I've worked, we had that situation where, we had people that could not touch the COI. And
Right.
so we would have a lockdown, so they would have zero visibility on any of the clients with COI. They couldn't see them in, the list of clients we had. They couldn't see their tickets, any of that. So if you can absolutely lock it down and show the auditors they don't have any access no matter what, then you're going to be solid.
But that's where we've seen some mistakes, right? That's where we've seen auditors come in harsh on some, because what's occurred is they think the customer, the client thinks, well, it's only on these systems, so we're okay. But they're not aware that those systems could actually be accessed outside of those systems, or the sharing of the documents, not outside to the public, but still within their organization. And so really those controls have to be placed throughout the organization.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there's so many ways you can access one of those systems. I mean, especially if you're in the security department, which they were, that couldn't access the data. They
Right.
could easily go to the admin center and open up delegate access and then get access to one of our emails. Or they
And that,
could easily log into
yeah,
someone else.
right. And that's the type of thing that an audit will look for, right? I mean, as it's
Yeah,
going through the controls.
yeah, separation of duties and principle of least privileges, making sure that they can't access the data.
Yeah, that's good.
What's the principle of least privilege, Sam?
Principle of least privilege is basically giving people the amount of access they need at a maximum. So let's go back to Chris, for example. He only needs to see documents regarding the onboardings and offboardings. So then we'll lock him down to just that access. So he can't see the pay, he can't see, their tax forms, he can't see who was hired after the fact, stuff like that. He can only see who he's
Yeah.
onboarding and who he's offboarding.
Okay. Is there a certain area in this CMMC journey that you're seeing businesses getting stuck or stalling? Like, at what level are they kind of like, I need to reach out and maybe get some help or figure something else out for CMMC?
The biggest one that I've seen so far, and it's mostly from the very small organizations, was what kind of data do I have? And the hard part is we can't come in and tell them what data they have. They need to figure that out. And then they'll get stuck at, okay, well, how do I classify it or how do I protect it? So I'm seeing a lot of people get stuck at the start, mostly the small businesses that don't have a dedicated security and IT team. But for the ones that do, normally where I see them get stuck is the whole audit process. They just don't understand the questions that the NIST 800 171 framework or the CMMC level 2 reads off, because it's very broad. Say, are you protecting, all applications and so and so. And so it'll make them wonder, like, well, what do they mean by this? Because what is defined as applications in this case?
Well, and that's where people that are experienced with the auditing process will know what that means. Is they're going to see if somebody can access that computer by this, or if whether that computer could send things outside of what you believe it's tied to, right? I mean, that's where
Right.
the practical insight kind of is really helpful.
Right. And that's one thing
Where
I
do you go to
definitely.
find out?
What's
Sorry,
that?
go ahead, Ashley.
Go ahead, Sam. I was gonna say, where do you go to find out if it's CUI or FCI? How do you figure
You
that out?
gotta go to whoever is contracting you to hold the data. So if I'm a small business and say the Air Force reached out to me and they want me to start making them parts for, their jet wheels or something, then I would need to go to them to figure out what I have. Or if I'm a third party, say like a security company, and I have a CMMC client that wants me to work with them, then I'm going to need to, ask them, what kind of data am I going to be in possession of?
Right.
Okay. This next slide, I'm gonna let David take it away with this one. I was going to put some fudge on there, like don't fudge things, but
Well,
Just
I
a
mean,
detail.
this gets back to what we were talking about, and that is, this is one of the compliance frameworks. Take HIPAA, for example. There's a lot of, uh, smaller healthcare organizations that don't have, like, that are very restricted on their resources and their time, and they can kind of go through and do a little bit, but still basically be HIPAA compliant, at least unless there's a breach, and then they get, you know, examined and they get their name on the list of the HHS website, which is like their wall of shame. Like, then they'll know that they weren't compliant. But if that takes a year and a half until they're breached or whatever, they could still continue to proceed without the penalties that the HHS would do. With CMMC, it's really different. Like, we've seen them ramp up a lot of investigations. We've seen them ramped up a lot of audits, and the scope of the audits go pretty wide. It's like a discovery, right? It's like a litigation, and they've also, they not only risk the contracts, which is really the whole goal of this, is let's get all the clients compliant so they can go back to business and not lose any contracts. That's the bottom line. But they're subjected, some of the leadership are subjected to False Claims Act claims. There's jail penalties to it. There's a ton of litigation costs. Like, nobody wants that. And so just doing what is being asked, and whatever you don't know, ask somebody that's experienced with CMMC, whether it's us, whether it's somebody like us. Like, ask somebody that does this regularly so that you can know this control is met and I can prove it if I'm asked. Like, literally being able, for every single control, being able to say, here's the report that shows this one is implemented and it's doing what is intended to be done. Because if you don't have that level of confidence and clarity, you are at risk for much more than just regulatory fines. Sam, any stories you have that you would want to share that could be an example of that?
Well, I haven't seen anyone get arrested in front of me yet
Well, that's good.
on violating CMMC. The most I have seen, luckily, from clients in the past is them getting a letter from like the government or their auditor saying, "Hey, you keep saying this, we keep seeing this, you need to fix this, or
Hmm.
we're either going to have to report you or we just can't work with you anymore." That's
Right.
at most what I've seen, but there's a lot of articles out there about how these false flags have taken in a lot of money. I mean, 2023, the fiscal year found that $2.68 billion worth of fines for CMMC compliance failures was taken. And there's a good point written on that article that it's not just a best practice, it's a legal obligation. The
Right.
government's not going to be able to take that much money from you if it's just a recommendation.
Right. Absolutely. And there's either a false sense of security that a lot of organizations have, or they are unsure on the timeline. I mean, there's been a lot of confusion over the years with CMMC. Let's not kid around. Like, it started, it morphed this past December. Last December, it had morphed into something different with the two levels. I think there's a lot of clarity now with this, and the timeline is rolling out, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be extended. Like, it seems to me that there's about, what, 200, 300 some organizations that have already gone through the level 2 compliance and have been certified. There's several hundred more that have not made the certification but that have gone through the audit process, because again, all of those 117 odd controls, all of them have to be met before you get certified. And so even if one or two are not done, like, what's the process then, Sam? Like, my experience is they have to go back. There's a period of 90 days when they can be re-audited, but they're not going to let you get certified unless all of them are done, or they determine that one of them doesn't need to be done. It's not applicable. You can't determine that as a contractor.
Yeah, and that's correct. And actually to add to that, I do these CMMC town halls every month through Cyber AB, and they made a good point that there's hundreds, even thousands of companies out there that are ready to get audited for CMMC level 2. The issue is there's less than 100 auditing bodies out there, companies that can even audit them. And
Right.
at most, I think they said they can get up to 4 to 5 a year. So you're thinking this number is just going to keep growing because of the new laws that are coming out, but there's not even enough auditors out there to even help you get your certification.
Right. And at a certain timeline, right? If an organization, at least the way it's written now, the way the regulation is written, by a certain timeline, and they're going to eventually have a drop dead date. But if an organization isn't certified by that timeline, they're not going to be qualified to get the contracts. And so that is a real risk. And so that's why we're even bringing this webinar. It's something that is coming a lot sooner, and it's not something you can really cram for like a college biology exam. Like you can't cram it at the end and expect everything to go through and you not to lose that contract. You have to prepare and begin this stuff now because it's coming very soon.
Yeah, and there's a warning I want to throw with that, and it's don't schedule your audit before even getting a risk assessment done, because
Yeah.
that's something that's been happening is they're like, oh, we can crank this out in 3 months. Let's get the audit for right after that. That 3 months comes around, that audit's coming up. They don't even have half the controls in place.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's really a balance, right? Because you want to be ready. And so you're like, well, let's get the audit going because that'll make us get what we need done by then. But that order on that date, you've got to have everything not just in place or in process to be in place. It's got to be implemented. You have to have verifiable proof that it's implemented and that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Because when they come in and they examine the physical aspect or they examine it virtually for the digital access, all of that, all those controls have to be in place. They have to be tested.
Mm-hmm.
So having that tested by somebody that's your partner and that's on your side before the auditors come in is really key, because every time we've done it, like people notice and they're like, oh, this is good because now we've identified those gaps. We can shore those up before the actual teacher comes in to grade us, basically.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So where do I start? After you have identified if you have CUI or FCI, then we would recommend engaging a readiness partner. David, what does a typical engagement with a readiness partner look like?
Well, it starts holistically first. I mean, the first thing you have to do is gauge whether you have to be level 1 or level 2. Level 1 is a much smaller hill to climb, and you need to have certain things like detection in place, EDR in place, endpoint detection and response on various devices. Depending on every organization is going to be different. But to answer the question, the controls are 17 of them, right? They're much more aligned to traditional best practices in IT and in essential security controls and layers that are out there. So it's very manageable. It still takes a little while to have it in place and to have the control vetted before you sign that legal attestation, but that can definitely be rolled out fairly quickly. So a good way is starting holistically, whiteboarding it out, evaluating it, having a risk assessment done, and really looking at it. Level 2 is a whole other beast. Level 2 is going through really identifying all of the permissions that Sam has talked about to that CUI and looking at every possible way an attacker could get access to it, right? And shoring those up. And then having the controls in place and proving that they are working. That's really the key. So up there we see readiness partner. Level 1 is a self-assessment, like we've talked. Level 2, having readiness, having that gap assessment, especially because level 2, I mean, it goes from 17 controls and you attesting yourself after you've kind of confirmed that you know what you're attesting to, because it is a legal attestation. But it goes from there to 115, 117 controls with an independent audit, third-party audit. So the difference between the two is night and day. And so level 2 is very strict, and the main focus for audits and for potential liability, but we are seeing more and more of the level 1 contractors being audited by the prime contractors because they are concerned that they're going to get themselves in trouble or lose fiscally. So they're requiring it of all of their subs. I mean, when you think about it to other organizations and other verticals, right? I mean, it's really a best practice. Shoring up your supply chain, shoring up your third party risk is really key. When you think about some of the major breaches that have occurred, a lot of them have been involved through the supply chain. It hasn't even been involved with the victim organization. It was their HVAC vendor. It was their other vendor, right? It was all of these that all contributed to it. Sam, anything to add to that?
I think you covered really the biggest parts of it. I mean, you definitely are always going to want those vendors and those third parties to check to make sure you are compliant, especially in that beast you said, CMMC level 2. You're going at, more than 10 times the controls as level 1. Yep. So for it to take that big of a spike, especially from someone who was level 1, was then told I need to be level 2, and they're going to think it's just as easy as level 1, they really need to check at what they're doing. If you go through the entire level 2 process and you think you have everything implemented, I would confidently say, I think you're missing something big here.
Yep, I would agree. And size doesn't matter. So actually, when you're thinking about where am I supposed to start, organizations may feel, well, I have less than 30 employees. I can't be level 2, right? Come on, right? Like, I don't need all these controls. It's like, it has nothing to do with your revenue. It has nothing to do with your employee count. It has to do with the data that you have access to, right? If you're holding just FCI and only FCI, right, then you're going to be level 1. But if you are holding and have access to CUI, then you are subject regardless of your size. We've seen organizations with 12 employees be a level 2. And, when you think about regular IT models and controls that are in place for a 12-person organization, they're not very expansive, they're not very vast. But to keep those contracts, right, they have to be now. They have to have all of those controls, all those 117 policies, procedures, and controls in place.
David, to add on to that, when I was freelancing, I had a company of less than 10 employees. It was just a metal shop that needed to be level 2 compliant because they wanted to get access to some drawings that they're going to bid on.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking it's just a metal shop. They don't have an office. They just have one small building and that's it. We got to figure out how to get this thing to level 2.
Yeah. And one might think, well, that is an unreasonable burden to place on an organization. And on the one sense, yeah, you're right. On the other sense, we're American citizens and we care about our national security. So we're good with this being a requirement, right? Like, it's very similar to HIPAA, right? Like, the new HIPAA rules are really, really strainful on, smaller healthcare organizations. Yeah, but as patients, it matters, right? Like there's a bigger cause here that we have to take this stuff seriously, and that's the justification for it. And with the changes in the guard and the administration, everybody kind of thought, well, maybe it was going away. And if it was going away, wow, was this a lot of work for nothing, right? Like that was a lot of regulation for nothing. And all the minds and the powers that be have all said, this is not going away. This is happening, and it's happening on time. That's all of our indications. So that is very significant.
So before we have this webinar today, Sam and David and I talked about some commonly asked questions that people have about CMMC. And one of those was for organizations not using Microsoft. They're asking, will a Google environment pass CMMC compliance?
Great question. Great question. And the answer is generally no, it won't. Sam, do you want to articulate what we found?
Yeah, so even though Google has been found to have CMMC compliance to an extent, people with level 2 needs for their environment, they are going to run into some issues, and a lot of them actually. There's an article I read this morning about how Google will require a lot of, third-party tools to help you get secure. And when I think about it, I can also see why that would be the case, because Google is just, it's email really. It's email, meetings, and basically like SharePoint. That's all it is. It doesn't manage your computers. It doesn't manage your environment, stuff like Microsoft does. And so you're going to need a lot of third-party tools to kind of replace those missing gaps. So access control policies on computers, you can't install certain softwares. Google's not going to be able to stop that from happening. But if you get a third-party tool, like ThreatLocker, for example, that will be able to stop from certain softwares from being installed on those devices. And so that's where, if you need to meet level 2 requirements under CMMC, you need to go with GCC High from Microsoft. But the only downside right now, and it's still a work in progress with that, is that they don't fully support Copilot yet. GCC, however, does support Copilot, but if you need to work with ITAR related information, you need GCC High, but you won't be able to use Copilot yet.
So explain for everybody in attendance or who may watch this later what ITAR is and how that relates. I think you mentioned it earlier, but I just want, anytime we mention acronyms, I just want them explained.
Yeah, but basically the best way to explain it, it's basically the International Trade Arms Regulation. And it's what's used, when it comes to working with government data, government items, being transported, made, created, so on. It's a very serious state, and that's the one way we would label our clients in a previous role of mine is as ITAR when they're CMMC. Some of them created military weapons or military parts, and those were the clients that the people could not touch if they were not CMMC.
Makes perfect sense. In terms of timeline, what we saw is this past December, I think it was the 16th, the final rule kind of took effect, right? And the assessments were now kind of allowed. Then in January, the C3 POs began conducting assessments. And then by the end of this year, right, that's when the rule gets finalized, and then all of the CMMC requirements are going to start to be included in all the DoD contracts. And so there's a couple different phases being rolled out as well. As I understand, late this year, phase 1 rollout, so level 1 and level 2 assessments will be required. And the C3PO evaluation of the level 2s will be done and then have to be completed all within a year. And then later on in 2026 is when like level 3, which we're not really addressing today, those assessments begin. But the full and final compliance in terms of the contracts begins at the end of this year, and then everything has to be in place and solidified in the next 2 years. So the timeline, given how long it takes to roll these things out and to get yourself at the level, it's something that needs to be begun soon.
Yeah, it's something that can't wait at all. It's something you need to get right on. If you know you need it, you need to get started on it because
Right.
the government doesn't wait for you. If you're not meeting that requirement by the time they, pound the hammer, then they're going to take everything from you that's related to CMMC.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, by being proactive and doing it when you know you need it, right? Going through the process and beginning it early is really smart, because in terms of the exams and the audits, they go a lot better when you're voluntarily there and you're showing up and you've done things and you've consulted with groups and they're part of it and they're helping you along the way. Like it all goes a lot better. That's what we've seen over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one thing of advice I'd say is if you think if your company doesn't deal with anything FCI or CUI right now, but you think it might, it won't hurt to at least start budgeting for it or to at least start getting your company in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, and or at least having things assessed, right? Just have a fresh set of eyes look at things, especially that's one of the benefits, even if you're going to self-attest, having a second set of eyes look through everything from their lens with their experience. Look at it, then you're getting the right advice, right?
Right.
Well, if today's conversation sparked questions about where your organization stands, we would love to invite you to participate in a Tech Forward workshop. I'm going to let David talk a little bit about that, but there's no sales pressure. It's just real feedback and next steps tailored to your business. It helps you outline a roadmap for your cybersecurity plan and IT.
Yep. Yeah, we've been doing these for years. There's no cost. There's no sales fluff in it at all. It's really a holistic overview of identifying the controls, identifying how you're doing things today, and identifying those gaps. And it's not a detailed technical gap analysis or risk assessment. It is more a business impact holistic approach, and leadership always finds it beneficial. You get a roadmap when you're done, and you can really kind of chart out, well, I think I'm on track here, I have too much risk here, we can take these next steps to shore that up. It's really eye-opening, and we get a lot of really positive feedback, and you can't beat the cost. So it's not no cost because it doesn't have value. I will say it does. We can charge for them. We have in the past. We choose not to because of our other roles that we have in protecting critical infrastructure and national security. And it's just the right thing to do, is just to get it out in front of as many people and have them being asked the right questions and making sure they know how to answer them, and they know the business impact of it.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'll be sending an email shortly with a copy of the recording, the slide deck, and some other resources, as well as a link if you want to check out the Tech Forward workshop or book some time to go ahead and start it. But thank you all very much. Until next time, have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you, everyone.